Will there be video games under communism? Well, communism is not a state of affairs to be established. It is the real movement of the people which seeks to abolish or sublate the current state of things. So I don't know what communism will look like, and nobody does. But let's not leave it at that, because your real question is not will there be video games under communism, it's are video games good for society collectively? Because what society determines good or bad is actually going to determine the state of affairs under communism. Communism isn't some magic prescription where we can calculate what's good or bad for society. It is a form of government based in the people, specifically workers, which is going to determine these things. So I don't have a definite answer to whether or not there will be video games under communism. But what I do know is that there are certain facts which we can acknowledge. And I think that communists should think about these things and take them very seriously. In our current society, many people do pose the question of video game prohibition, but they pose it onto the individual, the gamer, the parent, therapists, doctors, etc. And if you say that maybe society should have some rational limits on gaming for the common good, well, then you're thinking like a communist, and that's against freedom. But why should we have the freedom to be selfish, unhealthy, and unproductive? So I'm not going to lay out the blueprint for a communist society, but I'm going to try to think like a communist by placing the social question first and foremost, rather than the question of profits or the question of how to keep people docile. So video games are not all bad. Video games are a medium, and they have a lot of good for society. They can teach about various concepts, simulate reality in a sort of sandbox, challenge the intelligence of the person playing and make them smarter. They can improve communication skills with multiplayer games, and they can improve reflexes. Video games are an art form which are capable of telling stories and invoking feelings which are not otherwise possible because they interact with the player in a unique way. A blanket ban on video games is purely reactionary thinking, and I don't advocate for such a thing, nor do I think it would ever occur. Even North Korea has video games which are at least used as a way to educate children in a fun way. China has a huge gaming culture, but they do place rational limits on gaming time for children. Now, America is not North Korea or China, but the reason why those countries have limitations is that they place the social question first and foremost, as opposed to the US, which moves social burdens onto the individual in the name of freedom. We need to put public health and the social question into consideration above all other things. What is actually good for society? For example, in America, video game addiction is a very serious problem, and games are made to be addictive in order to make money. Now, I'm not saying to abolish the private production of video games, but I am saying that games that are made to be addictive should probably have limits put on them. One study shows that about 3 to 4% of gamers have gaming addiction disorders. That's 5 to 6 million people. And the statistics skew younger, meaning developing minds are the most susceptible to gaming addiction, which can stunt their human development, since the mind will then devote a great amount of its resources to gaming as opposed to actually benefiting society and actually helping other people. Some statistics are that up to 10% of gamers are addicted to video games, meaning that they play games more than they think is ideal or more than they would like to. They're wasting their human potential. Many video games act as legalized forms of gambling, and I think that loot boxes and other things should certainly be eliminated because they have zero potential to cultivate the individual, and for some, they can be dangerously addictive. I don't think that we should leave people behind in society just because they have poor impulse control and get addicted to gambling. That's extremely stupid because these are people, real people with potential, and we're allowing them to just, go down the drain just because you don't have the same impulse control as other people. Also, many video games are funded by the US military as a form of propaganda, which desensitizes children to killing and promotes fictional narratives which frame foreign countries as immediate terrorist threats which must be obliterated, that glorify the ugliest parts of society which all good people seek to eliminate. Militarism, war, killing, all of these things. We cannot allow this to continue. These types of games cannot be allowed to proliferate any longer, and there's no question about it. And I think that when a particular game shows itself to be problematic for society in any way, we can and should wield people's dictatorship to force the developers to change that game and to even fine them or imprison them for the damage that they cause to society. Sure, we could have maybe a private sector developing video games. That's not a problem in itself, but when it becomes a problem, we shouldn't let profits be in command. We should decide as a society what we want to allow and what we don't want to allow. There are many other examples of video games being harmful for society and places where we might think of rational limits, but I'm giving some examples to get you thinking in a more communistic way. So I don't know if video games will be banned under communism because communism is not a state of affairs to be established. I know that some rational limits on gaming would be a good idea, and it's very likely that a more collective view of society would have us ban or limit some video games or types of gaming. The question of video games is very serious because of how widespread they are, and it's much more important than whatever fun you have playing them to think about the good of society. Start putting the needs of society through yourself so that you don't end up being a parasite who thinks they are an individual floating above society and separate from it. Be a good citizen and think about things larger than yourself. That's communism. The video game question is similar to many questions of communism because it's a matter of what people actually decide is the best. And I say actual because there will be actual decision-making processes which are rooted in the people. A new type of democracy will be established, one which isn't based on keeping people docile while capitalists get to run away with their fortunes, but rather one based in representing the real wants and needs of the people so that we can have strong, happy families and so that nobody is left behind. A better society is not only possible, but it is inevitable, and it is time to start thinking about it. Communism will win, even if it is not called communism. No minority dictatorship can ever last forever, and one day the bankers and imperialists will have their comeuppance when their system fails and collapses all around us. They cannot continue to fool us into acting like hedonistic children while society is burning. They cannot place video games in front of us to distract us from higher aims, especially when these higher aims are the only way for us to survive. So you decide. Hedonism and death, or higher aims and the social question and survival. This is your choice. So it's time to wake up. Video games are not the most important thing in your life. Reality is calling you. So step out of the simulation, step out of the matrix, and start to think about the future. Will you answer the social question, or will you perish? This has been Hertz from Bismuth. Remember to like the video if you like it, dislike if you don't like it. Comment if you have something to add, maybe I missed something. Subscribe for more, and share this video around so that other people can get the message. See you next time.